The sky over New Toronto glowed with the unnatural turquoise of sonary atmospheric shields. Lena Kao watched from her apartment window as another transport ship descended through the barrier, its hull briefly shimmering like oil on water before normalizing to standard matter. 6 months since Earth had joined the Galactic Union, and still these arrivals sent a chill down her spine. Her father's voice drifted from the kitchen. "Tea's ready. Kongai?" Lena turned from the window, forcing a smile. Dong Cao, once the most celebrated erhu player in the Vietnamese Philharmonic, now spent his days brewing tea and tending to a small collection of houseplants. His hands, once nimble enough to draw sounds from strings that could make audiences weep, now shook slightly as he set 2 cups on the table. "Did you hear?" he asked, his accent thickening as it always did when he was anxious. "They're doing it tomorrow." Lena nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. Tomorrow. The complete deletion of Earth's musical database, the cultural standardization demanded by the Sonari as a condition of Earth's membership in the Union. "It's for our protection." The Global Council had explained in their broadcasts, the sonary neural structure is hypersensitive to complex sound patterns. Our music causes them physical pain. Protection, as if Earth needed protection from its own heritage. Lena sank into a chair across from her father. "I still have the drives," she whispered. Dung's eyes widened. "Lena, they scan for storage devices. The punishment is nothing compared to losing everything," she interrupted, reaching for her tea. "Besides, they can't scan for memories." Her father's expression softened. "Music doesn't die. Kongai? It only sleeps." He tapped his temple, then his chest. "Here, and here." Lena's musical career had been just taking off when the Sonari arrived. After the Second Planetary War, the world had been desperate for new art, new sounds to replace the desolation. Her compositions, a fusion of Vietnamese traditional music, quantum harmonics, and neural feedback loops, had won her recognition in New Toronto's rebuilt cultural districts. Critics called her work memory made audible. Now all of it would be deleted. Every note ever composed, every song ever sung, every instrument ever played, wiped from human digital history. "What will you do?" her father asked. Lena's hands tightened around her cup. "What musicians have always done when oppressed," she replied. "Find another way to make sound." The next morning, Lena stood among thousands in Unity Square, watching the massive screens as the Global Council president addressed the crowd. "Today marks a new beginning for humanity," the president announced, her face solemn. "Our entry into the greater galactic community requires a certain adjustments. The Sonari have been generous in sharing their technology, their knowledge. This is a small price to pay for peace and advancement." "Beside Lena," a young man snorted. "Small price? They're taking our soul." She glanced at him, tall, with dark eyes that flashed with anger. She'd seen him before at underground concerts, before those two had been banned. On screen, the council president was joined by Chancellor Imari, the Sonari representative, tall and willowy, with skin that seemed to shift colors like an opal. Chancellor Imari stepped forward. "The Sonari welcome Earth to the harmony of civilizations," they said, their voice oddly musical despite the translator. "After your recent war, we bring stability, peace, order." A countdown appeared on screen. 10 minutes until the Great Deletion. Lena felt sick. Around her, some people wept openly. Others stood in stony silence. A few wore earbuds, desperately trying to memorize favorite songs before they vanished forever. When the countdown reached 0, there was no dramatic flourish. Just a simple message: cultural standardization complete. Across the square, public speakers that once played ambient music fell silent. Beside Lena, people checking their devices found music apps suddenly empty. returning only error messages. In storefronts, video displays flickered as their soundtracks disappeared. "They didn't just delete recordings," the young man beside her whispered. "They locked the pattern recognition. AI won't process musical sequences anymore." Lena nodded numbly. She'd expected this. The Sonari were thorough. As the crowd began to disperse, a commotion erupted near the eastern edge of the square. A child, no more than 7 or 8, had pulled something from his pocket. A small, crude flute made from rolled paper. Before anyone could stop him, he put it to his lips and blew. The sound was thin, wavering, barely a melody. But it was music. The first notes played in public since the deletion. Several nearby Sonari security officers doubled over, their opalescent skin flaring bright red. One dropped to their knees, hands clutching at their elongated ears. "Stop him!" someone shouted, but it was too late. The Sonari officers had recovered and were moving toward the boy with alarming speed. The crowd surged forward protectively, but parted when more officers arrived. "Tamir!" A woman pushed through the crowd, reaching for the child. "He's just a boy," she pleaded as the officers surrounded them. "He doesn't understand." "Unauthorized sound production is a violation of the Cultural Standardization Act," one officer stated flatly. "The child must be assessed." As they led the boy and his mother away, Lena caught a glimpse of his face. No fear, only confusion. He hadn't known he was breaking a law. He'd only wanted to make something beautiful in a suddenly silent world. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She paced her apartment, occasionally stopping to press her hand against the wall safe where she'd hidden her drives. All her work, all her teachers' works, hundreds of historical recordings, preserved but inaccessible. The Sonari hadn't just deleted music. They'd locked all sound processing technology to reject musical patterns. Her comm unit buzzed. An anonymous message. "Warehouse District, Block 7. Midnight tomorrow. Bring nothing electronic." Lena recognized the signature cryptographic pattern. It was from Malik, the young man from the square. She deleted the message immediately. The next night, Lena made her way through the darkened streets of the Warehouse District. Most of the buildings here had been damaged during the war and only partially repaired. Perfect for meetings that needed to stay hidden. Block 7 turned out to be an old shipping facility. Lena approached cautiously, noting the absence of surveillance drones, unusual in New Toronto these days. A figure emerged from the shadows. "Password?" a voice whispered. Lena hesitated. There had been no password in the message. "I don't have one," she admitted. The figure stepped closer, a woman with close-cropped hair and sharp eyes. Then hummed the opening of Beethoven's Fifth. Lena almost laughed. "If I do that, and there are Sonari within half a kilometer, we'll both be arrested." The woman smiled. "That's the password." She gestured toward a rusted door. "This way." Inside, the warehouse had been transformed. The floor was cleared, and about 30 people sat in a rough circle. Some Lena recognized, musicians, composers, sound engineers. Others were strangers, but all wore the same expression, a mixture of defiance and grief. Malik stood as Lena entered. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice low. "We're not using names tonight. For safety." Lena nodded, taking a seat on an empty crate. "We all know why we're here," Malik continued. "They've taken our music, but they can't take what's in our heads, our hearts, our bodies." He looked around the circle. "The question is, what do we do now?" An older man with silver hair spoke up. "We wait. This can't last forever. Eventually, they'll relax the restrictions." "And meanwhile, generations grow up without music," a young woman countered. "My daughter is 3. I want her to know songs." "We could leave Earth," someone else suggested. "There must be colonies where the Sonari influence hasn't reached." Malik shook his head. The nearest independent colony is 7 light-years away, and all transport is controlled. What about simple instruments? Lena found herself speaking. Things that don't require technology. Drums, wind instruments, strings. They've confiscated all known instruments. The short-haired woman who'd met Lena outside replied. And they're scanning for acoustic signatures that match instrumental sounds. Then we make new instruments, Lena insisted. We create sounds they don't recognize as music yet. A murmur went through the group. What about our bodies? Lena continued, warming to her idea. Heartbeats, breathing, footsteps. The sonari can't ban our physical existence. Body music. Malik nodded slowly. Organic sounds. It's not enough, the silver-haired man objected. You can't create complex harmonies with... It's a start, Lena interrupted. And maybe that's what we need. To start over, back to the most basic elements of sound. The discussion continued late into the night. By the time they dispersed, they had the beginnings of a plan. They would meet in small groups, never in the same place twice. They would experiment with sounds that wouldn't trigger sonari senses. They would begin to rebuild music from its most fundamental components. As Lena left, Malik caught up with her. Your father is Dong Chao, isn't he? He asked quietly. Lena tensed. How did you... I studied his recordings before they were banned. His erhu technique was revolutionary. Malik smiled. I'm a cellist myself, or was. And now? He spread his hands. Now I'm learning to make music with whatever remains. My father says music doesn't die. Lena told him. It only sleeps. Your father is wise. Malik replied. Will you come to the next meeting? Lena hesitated only briefly. Yes. 3 days later, Lena found herself in a different abandoned building, this time with just 5 others from the warehouse meeting. They had brought various makeshift instruments, a box that could be used as a drum, bottles filled with different levels of water, even a crude stringed instrument made from a wooden box and fishing line. The problem, explained a former sound engineer who called herself Blue, is that the sonari can detect conventional musical patterns. Their sensors are calibrated for certain frequency ranges and rhythmic structures. So we need to create music that doesn't register as music to their systems, Malik said. Exactly. Blue pulled out a device that looked like a modified radiation detector. This approximates how their sensors work. We can use it to test our sounds. They spent hours experimenting, finding that certain combinations of atonal sounds, irregular rhythms, and unconventional playing techniques could bypass the simulated sonari detection. Lena discovered that by tapping different parts of her body, sternum, cheeks, forehead, she could create subtle variations in tone. When combined with controlled breathing and vocal techniques that stayed just on the edge of singing, she could produce something hauntingly expressive. We're creating a new vocabulary, she said excitedly, a new musical language. By the end of the session, they had developed several rudimentary compositions that wouldn't trigger the sonari alarms. They weren't beautiful in any conventional sense, but they contained the seed of something powerful, the human need to create ordered sound, to express emotion through vibration and rhythm. We need a name for this, Blue said as they prepared to leave. This new approach. Heart music, suggested one. Body sonics, offered another. Soul pulse, said a third. Lena thought for a moment. Mindeko, she said finally, because it begins in our minds and echoes through our bodies. The others nodded in agreement. Mindeko it is, Malik confirmed. Now we need to spread it. Over the next few weeks, their movement grew cautiously. Small groups met in abandoned buildings, private homes, even public parks, appearing to be nothing more than friends gathering, while they quietly shared techniques for creating this new form of expression. They developed a system of notation that looked like ordinary text but contained coded instructions for bodily movements, breathing patterns, and vocal techniques. They created hand signals that could be used in public to indicate rhythms and melodic contours. Lena found herself at the center of this evolving art form. Her background in composition gave her insights into how to structure these new sounds into meaningful expressions. She began teaching others how to play their bodies, how to listen differently, how to find music in the spaces between conventional notes. One evening, as she was walking home from a session, she noticed a Sonari observation drone hovering nearby. She kept her pace steady, her expression neutral, but her heart raced. Had they been discovered? Had someone talked? When she reached her apartment building, 2 human officers were waiting in the lobby. "Lena Kao?" one asked, stepping forward. She nodded, trying to keep her breathing even. "You're required to come with us for questioning regarding potential violations of the Cultural Standardization Act." "What violations?" she asked, knowing it was futile. "Unauthorized sound production and distribution," the officer replied mechanically. "Please come peacefully," as they led her to their vehicle. Lena saw her father watching from their apartment window, his face pale with fear. The detention center was a repurposed office building in the government district. Lena was placed in a small room with a table, 2 chairs, and a recording device. She waited for almost 2 hours before the door finally opened. To her surprise, Chancellor Emari entered, accompanied by a human official Lena didn't recognize. "Miss Kao," the Chancellor said, their opalescent skin shifting to a calm blue. "Thank you for your cooperation." Lena remained silent. "We have been monitoring certain activities," Chancellor Emari continued, taking a seat across from her. "Activities that violate the terms of Earth's membership in the Galactic Union." "I don't know what you're talking about," Lena replied. The human official placed a device on the table and activated it. Sounds filled the room, recordings from their Mindeco sessions, distorted and fragmented, but recognizable. "These patterns," Chancellor Emari said, "while primitive, still cause discomfort to my species. They are clearly attempts to circumvent the Cultural Standardization Act." Lena straightened in her chair. "They are people trying to express themselves through the only means left to them. Expression must be regulated for the harmony of all species," the Chancellor stated. "The Sonari have experienced the destructive power of uncontrolled sound. Our histories record entire civilizations torn apart by sonic warfare." "This isn't warfare," Lena protested. "It's art. It's part of what makes us human." Chancellor Emari's skin rippled, showing flashes of red. "Your species is young in the galactic community. You do not understand the dangers. And you don't understand what you're taking from us." Lena countered, her voice rising despite herself. "Music isn't just entertainment. It's how we process grief, celebrate joy, connect with each other. It's memory, identity, culture. Yet you survived your recent war without our intervention," the Chancellor observed coldly. "Barely." The human official, who had remained silent until now, cleared his throat. "Chancellor, perhaps there is a compromise to be found, a supervised form of expression that meets both species' needs." Chancellor Emari's skin settled into a contemplative purple. "The Council has considered this. We propose a cultural exchange event, where Earth representatives may demonstrate acceptable forms of sound production." Lena's mind raced. An opportunity, however limited, was better than none. "When?" she asked. "In 1 month," the Chancellor replied. "During the Union Festival, you will be released to help prepare, but you will be monitored. Any attempt to continue these underground activities will result in immediate sanctions against your region." After they left, Lena remained in the room, thoughts churning. A month to develop a form of expression that wouldn't trigger the Sonari sensitivities, but would still convey something meaningful. A near impossible task, but not entirely hopeless. When she was finally released, she found Malik waiting outside the detention center. "How did you know?" she asked as they walked quickly away from the building. "Your father contacted me," he explained. "We've been taking turns watching the center. How bad is it?" "Not as bad as it could be," she replied, and told him about the proposed cultural exchange. Malik frowned. "It's a trap. They're trying to identify all of us." "Maybe," Lena admitted, "but it's also an opportunity to perform legally, to reach more people." "And if they don't like what we present?" Lena shrugged. "Then we're no worse off than we are now." They walked in silence for a while, taking an indirect route to avoid surveillance. "We should consult the others," Malik finally said. "This affects everyone." That night, a smaller group than usual gathered in the basement of an abandoned church. The risk of meeting had increased, but the need to discuss this development outweighed the danger. "It could be our chance to show the public what we've been developing," Blue argued after Lena explained the situation. "Or it could be the end of everything if we fail," countered an older composer named Thomas. "We need something extraordinary," Lena said. "Something that communicates on a level beyond conventional music." "What about the boy?" someone suggested. "The one who played the paper flute in Unity Square. Tamir," Lena remembered. "Does anyone know what happened to him?" A woman at the back of the room stood up. "He's my nephew," she said quietly. "They evaluated him and released him with a warning. His mother is terrified he'll do something like that again." "Could we speak with him?" Lena asked. The woman hesitated. "It's dangerous. Everything we're doing is dangerous," Malik pointed out. "But a child's perspective might be exactly what we need." Eventually, the woman, whose name was Yasmin, agreed to arrange a meeting. The group then turned to planning what they might present at the cultural exchange. "We need to combine everything we've learned," Lena insisted. "Body percussion, breath control, vocal techniques that don't register as singing. And we need to tell a story," added a former opera director. "Something universal that crosses species boundaries." By the time they dispersed, they had the skeleton of a plan. It was ambitious, perhaps foolishly so, but it was also their best hope. 2 days later, Lena met Tamer in a small park near his home. The boy was shy at first, clutching his mother's hand as Yasmin made the introductions. "I heard you made music when no one else could," Lena said gently, sitting on a bench beside him. Tamer looked up at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "It wasn't very good," he admitted. "I just wanted to make something nice." "How did you learn to make the flute?" Lena asked. "My grandfather showed me. Before—" His voice trailed off. "Before the aliens came." Lena nodded. "And what did it feel like when you played it?" The boy thought for a moment. "Like birds inside my chest, trying to fly out." His simple description struck Lena with unexpected force. This was what they needed, not technical complexity, but emotional truth. "Tamir, would you like to help us make more music?" she asked. "Music that won't hurt the aliens?" His eyes widened. "Can we do that?" "We're trying," Lena told him. "And I think you could help us." With his mother's cautious permission, Tamir began attending some of their sessions. His natural creativity and lack of preconceptions about what music should be were invaluable. He approached their experiments as games, finding joy in the simplest combinations of sounds. Weeks passed as they refined their performance for the cultural exchange. They recruited more participants, carefully vetted to ensure security. They practiced in small groups, never assembling the entire ensemble until 2 days before the event. The final rehearsal took place in an abandoned theater on the outskirts of New Toronto. For the first time, Lena saw their creation in its entirety, and it took her breath away. 50 performers moved in perfect synchronization, creating waves of sound through body percussion, controlled breathing, and vocalizations that stayed just below the threshold of singing. They stomped, clapped, tapped their bodies, exhaled in patterned sequences, and occasionally struck simple objects, rocks, pieces of metal, wooden sticks that produced sounds the sonari sensors didn't register as musical. The piece told the story of Earth's journey, from the silence before human existence, through the discovery of sound, the development of music, the devastation of war, the arrival of the sonari, the great deletion, and finally, the rebirth of expression in new forms. "It's beautiful," Malik whispered beside her as they watched the final movement. Lena nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. It wasn't music as they had known it, but it was undeniably powerful, a new language of sound born from loss and resilience. "Do you think they'll allow it?" he asked. "I don't know," Lena admitted, "but they need to hear it." The day of the Union Festival arrived with an atmosphere of tense expectation. The event was being held in Unity Square, now transformed with decorations representing the various species of the Galactic Union. Massive screens displayed images from different worlds, and diplomatic representatives mingled with Earth officials. The cultural exchange was scheduled for midday. Various species would present aspects of their artistic traditions, carefully selected to be inoffensive to all attendees. Lena and her performers gathered in a designated waiting area. They wore simple gray clothing, as agreed with the authorities. Nothing that could be interpreted as costumes or that might distract from the sounds they would create. Chancellor Emari approached as they prepared. "Miss Cow," they greeted her, their skin a cautious yellow. "I trust your presentation will adhere to the guidelines we discussed. It will cause no physical pain to your people," Lena promised carefully. The Chancellor's skin rippled slightly. "That remains to be seen." They handed her a small device. "This will monitor sound levels. If they exceed acceptable parameters, your performance will be terminated immediately." Lena accepted the device with a nod. "You understand the stakes," Chancellor Emari added, not quite a question. "Earth's status in the Union could be affected by today's events." "I understand," Lena replied evenly. As the Chancellor moved away, Malik joined her. "Are we still proceeding as planned?" Lena hesitated only briefly. "Yes, but be prepared for them to stop us." One by one, the representatives of different worlds presented their approved cultural displays. There were visual arts from Proxima Centauri, chemical poetry from Tau Ceti, and gravitational sculptures from a neutron star system Lena couldn't pronounce. Then it was Earth's turn. The 50 performers filed silently into the center of the square, arranging themselves in concentric circles. Lena took her place in the innermost ring, with Tamir beside her. They had fought hard for his inclusion, arguing that the child represented Earth's future. A hush fell over the crowd. Many humans in the audience looked confused, not knowing what to expect. The Sonari representatives watched with expressions unreadable to human eyes, their skin colors shifting rapidly. Lena took a deep breath and lifted her hands. It began with a single heartbeat, Lena tapping her chest in a steady rhythm, one by one. Others joined, creating a complex polyrhythm of heartbeats from across the ensemble. The sound was subtle but pervasive, filling the square with the most fundamental rhythm of human life. Then came breath, controlled exhalations that created a whispering undercurrent to the heartbeats. The performers moved in waves, their bodies becoming instruments as they struck their thighs, snapped fingers, rubbed palms together, and tapped various parts of their bodies to produce an astonishing variety of tones. The piece built gradually, telling Earth's story through pure sound and movement. When they reached the section representing the Great Deletion, the entire ensemble froze in mid-motion, creating a silence so profound it seemed to have physical weight. From this silence, Tamir stepped forward. His small figure stood alone in the center as he began a series of gentle movements, cupping his hands to his mouth, extending his arms, tilting his head to listen to imaginary sounds. He was miming the creation of his paper flute and the simple act of playing it, but producing no actual sound. The crowd watched, transfixed, as the child performed his silent music. Then, gradually, the adult performers began to respond to his movements with the softest of sounds, fingertips brushing against fabric, gentle exhalations, the faintest clicking of tongues against teeth. As the piece progressed, these minimal sounds grew in complexity and volume. Though still well below conventional musical thresholds, the performers' bodies moved in increasingly elaborate patterns, creating visual rhythms that complemented their acoustic creation. Lena, leading the innermost circle, kept careful watch on the Sonari representatives. Their skin colors were shifting rapidly, but she saw no signs of the bright red that would indicate pain or distress. The final movement brought all 50 performers into perfect synchronization, breathing, moving, and sounding as one unified organism. The effect was hypnotic, a complex communication that transcended traditional notions of music while still conveying profound emotion. As they reached the climax, Lena became aware of something unexpected. Some of the Sonari had moved closer to the performance area, their tall forms bending slightly forward as if straining to catch every nuance, and their skin, normally shifting through colors in response to emotions and thoughts, had stabilized into a deep, resonant blue that Lena had never seen before. The piece ended as it had begun, with a single heartbeat, this time from Tamir, his small hand tapping his chest until the sound faded to silence. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. The square was perfectly still, as if the entire crowd was holding its breath. Then, a sound broke the silence, a high, keening tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Lena realized with shock that it was coming from the Sonari. Their bodies were vibrating subtly, producing a harmonic resonance unlike anything she had ever heard. Chancellor Imari stepped forward, their skin now a swirling mixture of blue and violet. "What have you done?" they asked, but their voice held wonder rather than accusation. "We shared our heartbeat," Lena answered simply. "The most basic music of our existence." "It is familiar," the Chancellor said, seeming confused by their own reaction. "Like a memory from before memory." Other Sonari were approaching now, their bodies emitting similar tones that blended into a strange, ethereal chorus. A human official hurried over, looking alarmed. "Chancellor, are you in distress? Should we stop this?" Chancellor Imari raised a hand. "No, we are not in pain." They turned to Lena. "How is this possible? Your sounds should cause neural dissonance in our species." "Perhaps," Lena suggested carefully. "What causes pain is not sound itself, but certain patterns that your people have learned to fear." The Chancellor was silent for a long moment, their skin slowly settling into a deep, steady purple. "There is much to discuss," they finally said. "The Council will want to reconsider certain aspects of the Cultural Standardization Act." In the days that followed, rumors spread throughout New Toronto. Some said the Sonari had experienced a collective epiphany, others that they had merely been temporarily mesmerized. What was clear was that something had changed. A week after the performance, Lena was summoned to meet with Chancellor Imari and the Earth delegation to the Galactic Council. "We have been reconsidering our position on Earth's sound production," the Chancellor announced when they were assembled. "Our historians have been researching our own ancient records." They activated a holographic display showing text in the flowing script of the Sonari language. "According to these records, the Sonari once had our own form of what you would call music. It was banned over 30,000 years ago after being weaponized in a civil conflict that nearly destroyed our species." Lena leaned forward, fascinated. "You had music, and you forgot it?" "Not forgot," Chancellor Imari corrected. "Suppressed, eliminated from our cultural memory. The neural pathways that process certain sound patterns were deliberately altered through genetic modification. But our performance affected you," Lena pointed out. "You responded to it," Yes. The Chancellor's skin shifted to a thoughtful indigo. Your Mind-Deco approach appears to access neural pathways that were not modified, perhaps because they are connected to more fundamental biological processes like heartbeat and breathing. The head of the Earth delegation cleared his throat. Does this mean the restrictions on Earth's music will be lifted? Not entirely, Chancellor Emari replied. Much of your traditional music would still cause physical pain to my species. However, we propose a modification to the Cultural Standardization Act. The new agreement, formalized over the following months, created a category called empathic sound forms, expressions that originated from shared biological experiences across species. These would be permitted in intercultural exchanges in public spaces with appropriate warnings for sensitive species. Traditional Earth music remained restricted to private settings with proper soundproofing, but at least it was no longer banned entirely. More importantly, the development of new sound forms was actively encouraged, with joint research projects established between human musicians and Sonari neural scientists. Lena found herself at the center of this new movement. Her Mind-Deco approach became the foundation for a range of new expressions that bridged the gap between human artistic traditions and alien sensibilities. New genres emerged rapidly. Biosonic, which built on the body percussion techniques they had pioneered. Breath weave, focusing on the subtle modulations of exhaled air. Silent song, which combined minimal sound with elaborate movement patterns that could be heard through visual perception. The most surprising development came from the Sonari themselves, as they cautiously explored sounds that didn't trigger their neural dissonance. Some began to develop their own forms of expression. These alien compositions had an otherworldly quality that humans found simultaneously unsettling and beautiful. One evening, 6 months after the Union Festival performance, Lena sat with her father on their apartment balcony, listening to the city below. The sounds of New Toronto had changed, between the usual urban noise. One could now hear the rhythmic patterning of Mind-Deco practices, the melodic breathing of breath-weave ensembles, and occasionally the strange harmonic resonances of Sonari sound makers. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked Dung, who was sipping his tea contentedly. He smiled. "I told you, Kongai. Music doesn't die, it only sleeps." "But it's so different now," Lena said. "Sometimes I miss the old sounds, pianos, violins, singing." "Those will return, in time," her father assured her. "Meanwhile, we adapt, we create, we find new ways to express the inexpressible." He set down his cup. "That is what artists have always done. Through war, oppression, change." A soft knock at their door interrupted their conversation. Lena opened it to find Tamir and his mother, along with Malik and several others from the original Mind-Deco group. "We have something to show you," Malik said with barely contained excitement. They led Lena to a small workshop that had been set up in a previously abandoned storefront. Inside, various work tables held strange objects, combinations of wood, metal, stretched membranes, and unfamiliar materials that shimmered like Sonari skin. "We've been working with some Sonari scientists," Blue explained, picking up one of the objects. "These are hybrid instruments, designed to produce sounds that humans find musical but that don't trigger Sonari neural dissonance." She handed the instrument to Lena. It looked somewhat like a lute, but with an unusual configuration of strings and resonating chambers. "Try it," Malik encouraged. Lena hesitantly plucked one of the strings. The sound was unlike anything she had heard before, neither quite like an Earth instrument nor completely alien. She played a simple sequence and found that while the tonal relationships were unfamiliar, they had their own internal logic and beauty. "This is just the beginning," Blue said proudly. "We're developing a whole new instrumental vocabulary." Tamir tugged at Lena's sleeve. "I have one too," he said. showing her a small wind instrument that resembled his paper flute but was made of a material that seemed to shift colors like sonari skin. "The council has approved a pilot program," Malik explained. "Supervised musical education for children. Using these new instruments, Tamir will be in the first class." Lena felt tears welling in her eyes. It wasn't the return of Earth's musical heritage as she had known it, but it was a beginning, a new path forward that honored both human expression and interspecies harmony. "There's something else," Yasmin said, her voice low with excitement. "The Sonari have agreed to release limited access to the musical database." Lena's heart skipped. "They're giving back our music?" "Not exactly," Malik clarified. "It will be available only for research purposes, in specially shielded facilities. But scholars will be able to study it, preserve it, ensure it isn't lost to future generations." It was more than Lena had dared to hope for. Not a complete victory, but a compromise that contained the seeds of a richer future. In the months and years that followed, New Toronto became the center of a musical renaissance unlike any in human history. The constraints imposed by sonari physiology, rather than stifling creativity, had forced humans to explore entirely new dimensions of sound. Mindecho evolved into dozens of distinct styles and approaches. The hybrid instruments developed with sonari assistance spawned new musical theories and composition techniques. Even the most traditional musicians found themselves incorporating elements of these new forms into their work when they were able to play privately. Most surprisingly, some young sonari began to show interest in human sound forms. Through careful neural training, they developed the ability to tolerate and even appreciate certain types of earth music, though always in modified forms. 5 years after the Great Deletion, a landmark event took place, the first interspecies concert, featuring both human and sonari performers. The program included traditional works from both cultures, performed in ways that respected neurological differences, as well as new compositions created specifically for the event. Lena, who had been asked to compose the final piece, stood backstage with Tema, now a talented young musician in his own right, and watched as the audience filed in. Humans and sonari sat together, along with representatives from other union species who had become interested in this unique cultural experiment. "Are you nervous?" Tamir asked her. Lena smiled. "A little. It's not every day you perform for multiple species." "Your father would be proud," he said quietly. Dung had passed away the previous year, but not before seeing the beginnings of this new musical era. His last words to Lena had been, "The silence was just a rest between movements." When it was time for Lena's composition to be performed, she took her place at the center of the stage. Human musicians with their hybrid instruments formed one semicircle, while sonari soundmakers formed another, facing them. The piece began with the same heartbeat that had started their Union Festival performance 5 years earlier, a reminder of where this journey had begun. But this time, the heartbeat was joined by the resonant tones of sonari bodies, creating a counterpoint that spoke of difference and harmony simultaneously. As the piece unfolded, it told the story of two species learning to hear each other despite profound differences, the story of loss, adaptation, and rebirth that had defined the past 5 years. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of perfect silence, not the silence of absence, but the silence of completion, of communal listening. Then the audience erupted in their various forms of appreciation, humans applauding, sonari emitting pulses of colored light, other species responding according to their customs. Backstage after the performance, Chancellor Imari approached Lena. Their skin was the deep, resonant blue that Lena now recognized as profound emotion. "Your father had a saying," the Chancellor remarked. "Music doesn't die, it only sleeps." Lena nodded, surprised. "You knew my father?" "I spoke with him several times before his passing. He was wise." The Chancellor's skin rippled with subtle patterns. "Perhaps the same could be said of cultures. They do not die. They transform. Later that night, Lena returned to her apartment in what was now called the Harmony District. She opened the wall safe where she had kept her drives hidden during the years of Prohibition. They were no longer necessary now that the musical database was partially accessible again, but she had preserved them as a reminder. Beside the drives lay a simple paper flute, not Tamir's original, which had been confiscated, but one Lena had made during those early days of silence, never daring to play it. She picked it up now, feeling its fragile form between her fingers. Then, making a decision. She placed it in a small display case on her wall, a relic of a difficult time, but also a symbol of resilience. Outside her window, the sounds of New Toronto drifted up, a complex tapestry of human and alien expressions woven together in ways no one could have imagined 5 years ago. It wasn't the music she had grown up with, nor was it what future generations would create. It was a transitional form, a bridge between what had been lost and what was yet to be discovered. Lena opened her window wider, letting the sounds fill her apartment. In the distance, she could hear a group practicing one of the new breath weave compositions, their controlled exhalations creating patterns that reminded her of her father's erhu playing, not in sound, but in feeling. Music had not died. It had transformed. And in that transformation, humanity had found a new way to express its indomitable spirit, not through defiance, but through adaptation, not through preservation alone, but through evolution. As Lena stood listening to the night sounds of a city relearning how to make music, she felt a sense of completion. The silence had been broken, not by returning to what was, but by creating what could be. And in that creation, something precious had been saved after all.